Have they told you that the U.S. government owes $14 trillion to all black people living in the U.S.? But who will make the U.S. pay this money? After black people fought for their rights, Cori Bush, an American politician and activist, raised her voice for black people. Cori Bush has exposed and acknowledged all the pain that white people in power inflicted on black people in the past. In response, she has proposed reparations of $14 trillion. However, many white people question why today's white individuals should bear the responsibility for the injustices committed by their forefathers against black people. If this approach is followed, then these white individuals should not inherit the lands or wealth acquired by their forefathers through injustice against black people. So, will justice be served to black people this time, or will the proposal remain just that, a proposal? Let's find out.
The Black History Archives.
Cori Bush, an American politician and activist who serves as the U.S. representative for Missouri's 1st Congressional District, has talked about something that made Biden sleepless at night. Cori Bush has given a $14 trillion reparations proposal, which she introduced to address historical injustices and the enduring legacy of slavery and systemic racism. The proposal for Black Americans holds significant importance as a bold legislative move aimed at addressing historical injustices and confronting the enduring legacy of slavery and systemic racism. The proposal seeks to compel the federal government to formally acknowledge and atone for the deep-seated inequalities resulting from centuries of chattel slavery and discriminatory policies. Representative Bush emphasizes the moral and legal obligation of the United States to provide reparations, framing it as an essential step toward rectifying the lasting harm inflicted on millions of black individuals. The introduction of this groundbreaking legislation sparks a national dialogue on the need to reckon with the historical roots of racial disparities and work towards a more equitable future. The proposal is part of a long-standing effort by Democrats, dating back to 1989, to push for compensation for Black Americans. Representative Bush, along with lawmakers like Barbara Lee and Jamal Bowman, highlights the ongoing impacts of slavery by pointing to the racial wealth gap, voter suppression, and negative health outcomes as direct consequences of historical injustices. By calling for a substantial $14 trillion in reparations, the legislation signals a commitment to addressing the scale of the harm inflicted. It emphasizes that reparations are not merely about financial compensation, but a crucial step toward healing the wounds of a deeply divided history. But many white people think that providing reparation now makes no sense. Why should the black people be paid for the pain they endured? Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Let's continue now. Representative Cori Bush argues that the federal government has both a moral and legal obligation to provide reparations for historical injustices inflicted upon Black Americans. During a press conference in St. Louis, Missouri, she emphasized the enduring legacy of slavery and systemic racism, asserting that the federal government played a direct role in the enslavement and exploitation of Africans and Black people throughout history. Bush contends that acknowledging and atoning for these deep-seated inequalities is a moral imperative rooted in the recognition of the harm inflicted on millions of Black individuals over centuries. From a legal standpoint, Representative Bush refers to the historical context of slavery and the subsequent discriminatory policies that have disproportionately affected Black communities. The call for reparations is framed as a means of fulfilling the legal responsibility to rectify the systemic injustices perpetuated by the federal government. This perspective aligns with the argument that reparations are necessary to address not only the direct consequences of slavery, but also its lasting impacts on contemporary societal issues such as the racial wealth gap, voter suppression, and negative health outcomes. The proposed resolution, calling for $14 trillion in reparations for Black Americans, is designed to compel the federal government to formally acknowledge and atone for the historical injustices inflicted on the Black community. Firstly, the legislation intends to confront the economic disparities by addressing the racial wealth gap, a direct consequence of historical injustices. By allocating a substantial financial compensation of $14 trillion, The proposal aims to provide a significant economic boost to the Black community, addressing the economic disadvantages that have persisted over generations. Secondly, the legislation acknowledges the impact of historical injustices on political participation, citing voter suppression as a consequence. By addressing these issues, the proposal seeks to create a more equitable political landscape, recognizing that systemic racism has hindered the full participation of Black Americans in the democratic process. But does paying for past injustice make sense? Why highlight the past matter now? In her remarks, Representative Bush highlights how slavery has perpetuated Jim Crow and argues that the impacts of slavery persist in contemporary society. She contends that the racial inequities witnessed today are not natural consequences, but direct results of the federal government's historical role in the enslavement and exploitation of Africans and Black people. By providing this historical context, Bush seeks to highlight the systemic nature of the injustices and draw attention to the ongoing repercussions that have shaped the current socio-economic and political landscape. Do other lawmakers support Bush? Key lawmakers, including Representatives Barbara Lee and Jamal Bowman, joined Representative Cori Bush in advocating for reparations. Representative Barbara Lee likely aligns with the call for reparations by highlighting the moral imperative of addressing historical injustices. As an advocate for social and racial justice, Lee may emphasize the need for the federal government to take responsibility for its historical role in perpetuating systemic racism and slavery. Her support adds weight to the collective push for reparations as a means of rectifying the lasting harm inflicted on Black Americans. Representative Jamal Bowman, known for his progressive stance on social issues, may contribute arguments highlighting the broader societal impacts of historical injustices. He could stress the interconnectedness of economic, political, and health disparities, pointing to the need for comprehensive reparations to create a more equitable future. Bowman's advocacy also focuses on the systemic changes required to break the cycle of injustice and discrimination. Does slavery impact Black people today? Bush called the matter of slavery's vestiges. When Representative Cori Bush refers to slavery's vestiges, she addresses the lasting remnants or traces of slavery that persist in contemporary society. In the context of her argument for reparations, slavery's vestiges encompass the enduring impact of historical injustices on various aspects of present-day life. Bush contends that the consequences of slavery continue to influence and shape contemporary societal issues, and she uses this concept to strengthen the case for reparations. Representative Bush argues that the systemic and deeply rooted nature of slavery's legacy is evident in contemporary societal issues, such as the racial wealth gap, voter suppression, and negative health outcomes. By using the term vestiges, she suggests that these issues are not isolated or coincidental, but are direct outcomes of the historical enslavement and exploitation of Africans and Black people. The word vestiges implies a persistent and inherent influence that transcends time, reinforcing the idea that the impact of slavery extends well beyond the period in which it officially ended. What impact would this $14 trillion make? The plan's financial compensation of $14 trillion is a key component. It is intended to provide substantial economic support to the Black community, directly confronting the racial wealth gap that has persisted as a consequence of historical injustices. By allocating this significant amount, the reparations plan seeks to address the economic disadvantages that Black Americans have faced over generations, acknowledging that the federal government's historical actions have contributed to the systemic economic disparities observed today. The reparations are framed as a form of restitution for the economic exploitation endured by the Black community throughout the history of slavery and discriminatory policies. Additionally, the plan likely includes provisions to address political disenfranchisement, as Representative Bush and her colleagues highlight the impacts of historical injustices on voter suppression. Measures may be introduced to enhance political participation within the Black community, acknowledging the systemic barriers that have hindered full democratic engagement. Furthermore, the reparations plan will incorporate initiatives to improve healthcare access and outcomes, acknowledging the negative health consequences of historical injustices. By addressing health disparities within the Black community, the plan seeks to rectify another dimension of the ongoing impact of slavery on contemporary societal issues. But will this be given to black people? Or will it just remain a proposal? The current status of the national dialogue surrounding reparations is marked by increased momentum and attention sparked by Representative Cori Bush's $14 trillion proposal. Over the years, the dialogue has evolved from a niche and relatively marginalized discussion to a more prominent and divisive national conversation. In recent years, the topic of reparations has gained traction, with about a dozen cities and the state of California considering reparations programs. Representative Bush's legislation contributes to this ongoing discourse by presenting a bold and substantial reparations plan, bringing the conversation to the forefront of national attention. Despite this increased visibility, the topic remains highly divisive. Polls indicate that approximately 3/4 or more of white adults, along with the majority of Latinos and Asian Americans, oppose reparations. However, there is strong support for the proposal among Black Americans, who overwhelmingly back the idea of reparations. The generational divide is also notable, with younger generations being more likely to advocate for cash payments to the descendants of enslaved people. The evolution of the national dialogue reflects a shifting societal awareness of historical injustices and a growing acknowledgement of the need to address systemic racism. While opposition persists, the conversation has expanded and gained consideration at various governmental levels, indicating a changing landscape of public opinion and a broader recognition of the historical roots of contemporary racial disparities. But why do white people oppose this idea? They oppose reparations due to a belief that they, as individuals, are not personally responsible for historical injustices such as slavery. This perspective contends that contemporary individuals should not be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors. But why do they take the lands from their fathers that were snatched from black people of the past? If white people can pass on the wealth they created from injustice with black people in the past, then the black people of today also deserve to get reparation for the pain their forefathers endured. Do you think black people should be paid for the injustice they still go through? Is it a favor or is it the state's job? Let us know in the comments section. Will the white people in power let this happen? Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.